Hello, my name is Michael Lambert, and today I want to talk a little bit about how the Prime Minister and the government generally are all laughing at us, how they're all just really mocking us, and what they're getting away with, because it is really quite ridiculous, and it's extraordinary that it's able to go on without anybody making much fuss about it. But anyway, before I do that, if you haven't already subscribed, I would really be grateful if you would, and if you like this video, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, it will help me quite a lot. So to begin with, regarding the Sue Gray report, now I was wondering, I was really puzzled as to how Johnson was going to get out of this. I know he's absolutely Houdini and gets away with so much, but I really thought it was going to be impossible, because we all knew that the report was going to confirm that he, when he told Parliament that all rules had been obeyed at all times, and when he'd given that ridiculous description of explanation of his attending the party in Downing Street, in the garden and so on, that it was going to be seen that he had misled Parliament. And he obviously would have known that, and so this report was really very important. And at the same time, he seemed quite relaxed. He didn't seem to have a care in the world and seemed very confident. And he kept saying that the report would be published in full. And that, again, I couldn't really quite understand. Why was he so confident? He didn't know what was in the report. Why was he so confident that it could be published in full, not knowing what was in it and the consequences for him personally? And then I think on Tuesday night, his pet whippet, Rees-Mogg, was on Newsnight, and he said his very words were that, in his opinion, for better or for worse, that we had moved effectively to a presidential system, and that therefore, if there were a change of leader, there would have to be a general election. Now, this is apparently what the whips have been telling backbenchers in the Conservative Party all week, that if you vote for Johnson, if you vote for a leadership competition, and he has to be changed, we'd have to have a general election, and you're probably going to lose your seat. It was a pathetic, naive, and ridiculous ruse to try and persuade backbenchers not to vote against Johnson, because we knew there were loads of backbenchers, loads of Tory MPs who were all waiting, as they kept saying, waiting for the Sue Gray report before deciding whether or not to vote for a new leader or a leadership election. So that didn't really work, and then I didn't think it was going to work, I must say, but then I still couldn't quite understand how he was going to get out of it. And then, of course, on Friday morning, first thing Friday morning, we're told that the police had asked Sue Gray to remove anything but briefest of references to any matters that they were investigating. And so the report, in effect, was neutered. And whatever report does come out, when it eventually comes out, is going to be very limited. No doubt much redacted, and anything that is of anything serious is going to be excluded. Now, I just want to say something about these two reports, because it's quite important. The Sue Gray report is extremely important, because depending upon what findings she comes up with, it could determine the fate of the Prime Minister, which is the fate of the whole country. So it's incredibly important. And we all know, as I said before, that it's almost certainly it's going to condemn the Prime Minister, and it's going to be very difficult to see how he could survive after such a report. So it is really of historic importance, this report. The police report, because they're not investigating any other criminal allegations, the police report is to decide how many fixed penalty, £200 fines they're going to issue. And so the Sue Gray report has been put on the back burner for months and months and months, whilst the police investigate how many people and which people they're going to issue with a fixed penalty. And to show you how keen they are to get this done so quickly, they are going to write to each person who is in Downing Street. That's maybe a couple hundred people. They're going to write them letters. Probably send them for second class. How long is it going to take to write the letters? They're going to write 200 letters or whatever it is and wait for the replies to come in. Of course, people are going to take as long as possible. If you've got a parking fine and they write to you about it, you're going to try and delay it or try and come up with excuses and all the rest of it. So 200 people or whatever it is are going to write back to the police. Then they have to go through it all and decide which ones they further investigate, which ones they automatically fine, and which ones they let off. And this is going to take months and months and months. And in the meantime, the report which will determine the future of the Prime Minister will be kept hidden, or the majority of it. And the only person in the whole country who benefits by this is the Prime Minister. There is no justification whatsoever for withholding the Sue Gray report. There is nothing in there that could prejudice the decision of the police as to who they fine. The only justification for withholding a report pending a police investigation is if there's going to be a jury trial. I can tell you there is going to be no jury trial for any of these fixed penalty tickets any more than there's going to be a jury trial for a parking ticket. The whole thing is a device to give Johnson enough time, and he can decide. I mean, he's obviously got Cressida Dick in his pocket. He can decide when it's released, if ever. And it might not be till next year. Who knows? In the meantime, everybody forgets about it. Everybody moves on. He's laughing at us. So I just want to talk about a couple of cabinet ministers now. The first one is would-be shop assistant Dim Lizzie Truss. Now, last year she was our International Development Trade Secretary or whatever, and she's now the Foreign Secretary. She's also taken off since Lord Gormless left. She's taken on the job of Northern Ireland negotiator as well. And her job last year was to deal with all these many countries who were queuing up for years to do trade deals with us, and working really hard all year, both as Trade Development Secretary and as Foreign Secretary. She eventually got a little deal with Australia. As anyone, it will, if all goes well, as I've said before, it'll add something like 1/10 of 1% to our GDP. So not an insignificant deal. And I think sort of to celebrate this great achievement, this great benefit from Brexit of getting a trade deal with Australia, she and some of her colleagues all went off to Australia. 14 of them went, her and 13 other people, including a photographer. Now, Liz Truss is, for some reason, she seems to think she looks good in photographs, I think, because if you follow her on Twitter, I mean, every other day there's a photograph of her with some nondescript foreign dignitary with Union Jacks all over the place and so on. She loves photographs of herself, so she has her photographer go to Australia with her on the team of 14. Now, they could have flown to Australia on Qantas, and there's a direct flight from London to Darwin, and then they went to Sydney and they went to Adelaide. So they could have gone very easily. And if they'd all gone business class, all 14 of them, it would have cost £7,000 each, £98,000. But there was a problem, you see, and it was a security problem. It has been explained, the Foreign Office have explained it. It was a security problem. If they'd gone on a commercial airline, they might have been overheard. And this was a big risk. You know, if for example, Liz Truss was saying, perhaps talking to her private secretary next to her and saying, you know, we're going to invade Russia next week, somebody might have overheard that and given it to the newspapers. And for that sort of reason, they obviously couldn't go on a commercial airline. So they had to charter a plane, the government plane, and it doesn't go as far as the Qantas plane, so they had to stop a couple of ways to refuel on the way there. So it took a lot longer to get there, and then when they got there, they had to sit on the runway in Sydney for a couple of days, and they had to have two crews because it's a long way to go. So they had two crews and all this immense amount of fuel and carbon emissions and so on, and It cost £500,000 apparently. Well, it doesn't really matter because poor people pay for it, so there's no problem with that. But whilst they were there would have been a lot of other expenses. They stayed in the very best hotels, ate the best food and so on. I'm sure they all had a nice day at the beach as well whilst they were there, and that was it. £500,000 for a 3-day trip to Australia. For what reason, I've absolutely no idea, other than to celebrate the business deal. Now, another cabinet minister, I think, probably also has ideas above her station is Therese Coffey. Actually, it's not Therese. She's I'm not sure she was born with them or whether she put them on herself, but she's got some accents on her. She's got some French accents on her Christian name, so she's actually Therese. Okay, so Therese Coffey is our work and pension minister, and well, she's pretty tough. She's pretty tough. She's extremely right wing. She's a sort of in the same school as our Home Secretary. I think she likes to make the lives of people who are suffering, people who are poor, as difficult as possible, and make their lives as hard as possible. And as Work and Pension Secretary, she was very keen on removing the universal credit uplift of £20 a week, which made a great deal of difference to the lives of a lot of people, which is pretty hard, I think. She has, for example, she's voted against same-sex marriage. She's voted against smoking bans. She's voted against climate change measures. She's very keen on tougher asylum legislation. She's very keen on tougher immigration rules and so on. She's generally a pretty tough woman, and she also, as I say, has ideas above her station, does our Therese. And last year, or 2019-2020, she was paid 80 odd thousand pounds as a member of Parliament, plus she gets another £70,000 as a cabinet minister, so she gets £150,000 a year. But Therese, who wants to make poor people poorer, she claimed in expenses, I'll tell you the exact figure, £201,278.38. Over £200,000 in expenses, in addition to £150,000 in salary. And this is a woman who wants to absolutely minimise in every possible way what the poorest in our society are living on. Not really a very nice woman, but again, she's laughing at us. And again, doesn't matter, poor people will pay. Now, the third thing I wanted to mention today is about civil servants' pay. Now, when I was starting out in life many moons ago, if you went into the civil service, you did so. If you went for any public body, you did so because you knew the job was secure. That was the thing about it. You knew that whatever government department or local authority department you joined, if you wanted to, you stayed there the rest of your life. You were never going to get sacked, and you had a decent pension, but the salary was always poor. That was the that was the compensation. You had a poor pay, but you had security. And nobody really wanted to get on, I don't think, went into the civil service because you're never going to get rich out of it. You're never going to live well out of it. But this is all changed over the years, and now civil servants, they I don't know who decides how much they get paid, but they are very well paid, particularly those that get towards the top. And an item I saw on the internet a couple of days ago, it was an article which had been in the Daily Mail, gave us a bit of information about just how well paid these people are. Bear in mind that the Prime Minister earns $150,000. He's running the country. He maybe didn't make a terrible job of it, but he's running the country. There are now 600 civil servants earning more than the Prime Minister, more than £150,000 a year. And don't forget, they get huge pensions. The highest paid civil servant is a guy called, let me just check his name. He's a guy who runs Network Rail. Not Network Rail, sorry, he runs HS2. A guy called Mark Thurston. Now he gets public money, this is, we're paying for this, so it doesn't really matter. £620,000 a year. The guy who runs Network Rail, he gets £590,000 a year. That's £11,346 a week. I don't suppose there's any connection with these sort of salaries and the fact that we have the most expensive railways in Europe. I'm sure that's purely coincidence. And there are 15 people working for Network Rail who earn more than £300,000 a year. 15 people working for Network Rail earn more than £300,000 a year. A lot of these people working from home. And what do they say? Well, I'll tell you, I've got a quote here. Government spokesman. Departments look to balance the need to be competitive with value for money for the taxpayer. There you go, you see. So when you find it's cheaper to drive to Edinburgh from London, or it's much cheaper to go by air, you know why? Because all the money is going to these people. Simon Case, that's the Cabinet Secretary. He's the guy who was going to investigate the garden parties and goings on in Downing Street, and who started to investigate until he found all of a sudden that he'd been at one of these parties, and it was then handed over to Sue Gray. He gets, as Cabinet Secretary, £205,000 a year, and I'm sure he'll retire also with a huge pension. These people are laughing at us. Ministers are just spending our money like water. The Prime Minister is lying his head off to us, treating us like idiots. And civil servants are just very often working from home, paying these huge salaries. And poor people are being squeezed. And this is a time when we know that the cost of living is going to be a huge issue. We know that prices in the shops are going up like crazy. We know that gas and electricity is going to go up enormously. We know that council rates are going to go up. We know that the income tax, the NHI increases are going to go ahead. The NHI increases instead are to help fund the NHS. I mean, the NHS must be so awash with money. They're going to get £6 billion from these national insurance increases. In addition to the £350 million a week we're saving since we left the EU, they must be absolutely awash with money. And with all these crises going on, and with this business going on in Ukraine and so on, what does the Prime Minister do? How much work is he putting in to solve all these problems? Friday, gets in his car, police escort at the front, police escort in the back, car behind with his personal photographer in, drives all the way to Wales, gets out, puts on a hard hat, puts on a fluorescent jacket, is filmed looking out over an estuary, is asked a question about the farming man with his animals from Kabul, and says, "Rhubarb." Quick shot of him getting in a lorry. He drives back to London again. That's the whole day gone. For a photo op. Who's running the country? This man is laughing at us. He's got away with the Sue Gray report, so he can relax. By now he'll be off in Chequers for a couple of days. He'll be back due for a holiday, I would have thought. We're being made complete and utter fools of. And whilst I think there's been quite a lot of anger about all these, about the garden parties and so on, and the Downing Street parties and so on, whilst there's been a lot of anger about this report being delayed and so on, it's amazing how quickly people forget about all this, and in a few days' time we'll be thinking about something else. And it's a great pity, because things are getting worse and worse. These people, the government, the Prime Minister, are making more and more fools of us, and it's pretty serious. It's pretty serious because at the same time as we know all these restrictions on our freedoms and so on about not being able to demonstrate and not being able to report what whistleblowers say and so on. So many things that are going on in the background that nobody's much concerned about, and I think it's time we really were a bit more concerned. But anyway, that's all I'm going to say today. But if you watched this far, thank you very much for watching. If you wouldn't mind subscribing and hitting the like button, I'd be very grateful. And until next time, bye for now.